Good evening. Hello. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 32nd lecture by Bengal Institute. You may have come to know about the academic program that is now going on. It is based on learning from the award-winning project of Aga Khan Award for Architecture. That program is unique for all of us because for the first time we are in direct collaboration with Aga Khan Trust for Culture. They're helping us in many ways, and together we have created this academic program with bringing in people from all over the world to learn about all the vast array of architecture that they have brought into limelight and given a sort of validation. So that is the point of discussion there at the seminar room at Bengal Institute now. And as always, we always try to open it up for everybody. Thus, we have Professor Eike Roswag-Klinge with us, and I'm going to give you a little background about our speaker today. So Professor Roswag grew up in a village farm in Germany. And in the midst of this unique upbringing with nature and building and making things. So after his high school, he went to learn carpentry seriously, like professionally for 2.5 years. And then he pursued architecture school. So he's a Berlin-based architect and professor. He works globally, and many of you know him through some of his works, especially the one that won Aga Khan Award in 2007 with Anna Heringer, the Meti School in Dinajpur. They also won another award recently in Shikhupur in Pakistan, and that won the Holcim Foundation Award. With all this, their team has started this new movement somewhat of building with alternative materials. I shouldn't use the word alternative. It is more like going back to the original and building things that we already have available in the nature. Without much ado, I would like to invite Professor Eike Roswag-Klinge here on stage. And before that, I'm just setting up his slides. Oh, so it's mirror, right?
Thank you so much for this very nice introduction, Mohammed. And yes, I'm very happy, would say glad to be back here in Bangladesh after such a long time. And yeah, we're spending nearly a week here together with my wife, Andrea, and we had 2 nice days also in Rudrapur, and it was very amazing to see how the tiny little things is working up there, up north, and how still continues the work of Dipshika there and the school. So I would like to present most of the time our work in the office, because I'm just moved recently to the Technical University in Berlin. So this is my 2 backgrounds now. So I'm working actually for the future after 15 years in the office, only 1 day a week in the office and 4 days at the university. So I'd like to have a small introduction and describe my motivation, or the motivation of us, our team. And then I will talk a little bit about our projects in Europe, and then also about what we so call the global south, or let's say countries abroad. So the office is working with natural materials, and so we're doing projects in Europe, from industrial buildings to housing to schools, etc. Almost we are ourselves quite surprised in natural materials. And then also schools out of earth and bamboo and other natural materials globally. And I will show that work later on. What we learned from working abroad through our studies. So our first project was this design-build project from Technical University in 1998 when I was a student in Mexico. And there's also where I met Christoph Ziegert, my partner. He is civil engineer and the expert on earthen technology, I think. And Germany has quite a big knowledge, DIN norms, companies working with earth, etc. And Christoph is something like one of the central persons in that networks. And I think I'm more in natural building systems, so earth is one of it. And what we learned in abroad, especially in our time when I spent 4.5 months in Rudrapur, is to work in dialogue with people. And that's what we're also trying to approach to our work in Europe, what is quite successful, so something like a bottom-up approach, or also working on an equal level, how our friends from Hundershala Foundation in India would call it. So this is the three main materials what we think natural build is based on. I think half of the world population lives in buildings which are linked to earth or built partly or totally out of earth. I think bamboo has a big role as well, and in our climate zones in the northern areas also timber has a lot of to do. And then we have natural stones and others, but I think the big three is earth, timber and bamboo, and that is our main research and building focus on. The office is doing quite a lot of research work. If you have questions on that one, Andrea is here. She's doing our research department. So the first project which she came into the office is the H-House project. It's Healthy House. So we have designed as part of a bigger consortium doing many things. We have designed especially inside walls which are vapor active and conditioning spaces and reducing building technology or building systems, let's say mechanical systems, especially in Germany. We are increasing through efficiency aspects our insulation and air tightness, and we are increasing in parallel mechanical systems what are causing other problems again. So we try to reduce also these technologies based into something what is a transformed building tradition out of natural materials in Europe as well. The second project is what is ongoing now is building from waste. So it's also a big consortium where we're working on concrete and other aspects. And our main focus is for sure the design for the consortium, but also two materials, what is timber and earth products. The earth products coming from a concrete, earth, sand, but also mineral-based materials coming from the concrete recycling. And then a very big aspect is how to reuse timber, what is unfortunately up to now still going to waste and got burned in Germany at the moment. So our focus is to reuse from reconstruction or changes of buildings, bring them these timber materials, use timber materials into factories, produce new elements, and then bring that one into what we could call a circular building. And our main learning will be at the end that we know how to build, how to design a circular building, and then what would be the reversible constructions, and then the appropriate natural materials. I think that's the main focus, and that's a little bit of view into the works we are doing with that project. So we are locating demolition constructions, and then we use that materials and transform them into some new elements, what would be also load-bearing and non-bearing constructions. So that's the office and the natural building lab. That's a unit, we call it, at the Technical University. That's the chair I'm guiding at TU Berlin. And we are trying to establish a new format of learning what is based on design-build projects. So most of our design projects are based on design-build. And also we are trying, for sure that's a need in university work at the moment, to establish research, but we are very interested to do so. And that's a diagram or a panel what was established with our lounge in April. So we are thinking about values, collaborations, what is quite intense, to work with society, with communities, learning in general. How do we learn as part of a society in change? What is the change of designers? How should they be? What should they learn? And what are the things they need to have to go in society and working with them together? For sure, we are building and doing research. That's our big network. For example, here's Dipshika and others globally we are linked with already. And also my colleague Nina Pavlicki, she's a researcher with us and also teaching. She established through a research project with others this design build network. So whoever from you as students did whatever small kind of piece of architecture somewhere in the villages, you are very much welcome to put your and publish your projects on that platform, the Design Build Exchange, dbexchange.eu. And we are very happy if you would bring your own. It could be very small things and publish it there. And then you also get information about this global network and conferences we are organizing together, etc. And that's what we do as our approach. So we call it the self-determined learning process. So whoever has seen the Bangladesh school, the METI school from yours, you know they are doing this kind of training more than schooling or teaching. So Paul Tigger, the founder, always said we are just facilitating our kids and they develop themselves. And that's the same way of working what we are establishing at the school now, that we don't try to teach students and you know, be critic on their works, but we just like to share and the students discuss the works themselves, and we are always trying to build at the end one building, so they are very critical discussing their different ideas and bringing it into one, and they design together as a team, bringing experts out from outside and also working with communities in the meantime. And so we are more facilitating our team, and that could be up to 40 people usually in a studio, sitting in a circle for an hour, 2 or 3, and then everybody goes his path of work, and then we just have very simple interaction later on. So it's not a frontal situation, and that's very, very efficient, and it's very, very passionate work what we have with the students. And that's one of our nice projects based on the research project RE4 Andrea is doing. We have been collecting materials, and we have been building a structure in a small social hub in a place in Berlin-Neukölln based on the resources we found from waste. One is timber from construction, demolishing, and so that's a kind of nice pavilion at the beginning. And then at the end we have installed out of cardboard boxes and cellulose fibers and newspaper recycling fibers, a nice new system of cardboard walls, what has a good insulation factor and what is quite innovative. And so that has a small space where also the people around could use in the winter for their meetings and gatherings. And it's all integrated into a garden program on that place in Berlin-Neukölln. So what is our motivation? If you're thinking about where we come from, living here in huts and caves in the past, then we developed something like craftswork, building natural houses, for example, like these Fachwerk houses or wattle and daub construction, and then still using fossil resources like brick for houses, but mid of the 19th century, we still have been adapting all our works to the climate. So all these buildings have been linked to climate, and through the oil and other fossil resources, concrete, steel, we had the chance to uprise our construction, and we didn't care any longer about climate design. And now we have this huge fossil footprint running the systems, but also building our structures, and that's the struggle we are in. So the resources are going down, for example, like the oil, but also sand is off. and other resources, and world population still grows, and we have to look after something what is a future option for us, and we see a huge potential in these materials out of the nature. And if you think that's quite dramatic, the peak oil again here, and the CO2 emissions, up 1945, what we should call the hour of zero after the Second World War in Europe. The emissions have been quite low, and in 1968, the Club of Rome published his book, The Borders of Growth, and everything was known at that point. So most of you have never been, nobody was even thinking about seeing you on the planet. I was born a year later. And but we knew everything at that point, and still carbon emissions and use of fossil resources started increasing a lot. And now we don't know how to reach climate goals in 2050 or sustainable global goals in the next decades. And we have to be very quick, because climate change, you can feel it extremely here in Bangladesh and other countries as well. So it's a drama, and it's still, we are increasing and increasing. And what is nice, what we can learn, but we also learn from abroad. I should have changed this photo. It's a nice oasis in Morocco, but it could be also Rudrapur, because those people, they live very close to the environment, and we can learn a lot from those communities. And I think if we got a link to what I think is a better life, and in between those different ends of society, let's say, I think we can learn from both sides a lot, and if we start negotiation in between, I think that's a huge potential. And I like this way of simple thinking and straight ahead interaction. And that's still what we believe, especially in Europe. We will just put some green on things, and we can put on more power. And I'm sure we will not be able to drive around 10 billion people with those vehicles, and neither they will have 100 or 200 grams of meat every day, because that's not affordable on the planet. And I think we need a major change in our behavior, how we live, how we build, how we consume, and I think there is a huge potential also to be a happy society if you do that change. Still, I think we are living in this way, being fatter and fatter, and these guys coming here as refugees from other countries at the moment to our culture, and I think that's something we need to find a way in between these things. Just one very simple technical topic. We are architects and engineers, and we have quite a technical focus in our projects. And I think that's the main knowledge we are basing our designs on, or our construction systems. That's an experience from the hot climate. That's 24 hours measured the outside temperature. That's this line. So it's in Abu Dhabi. In this case, it's an open fort in Abu Dhabi, and we have 45 degrees outside at the afternoon, and at night it's going down to 33 and up to 45 again. So it's a delta of 12 to 14 degrees. And the inside temperature, it's quite relaxed between 35 and 33, very stable the whole day through. And it's 8 to 10 degrees below the outside temperature peaks. That's something what we experience in hot, arid climate zones. And what could be also change if you don't focus any longer on concrete and brick and cement renders, because these buildings are boiling up. And this is something what Hassan Fatih already learned in the 1970s when he went to the Nubian domes. And the opposite of that thing is that the relative humidity level goes down if the temperature goes up, and the level goes up if the temperature goes down. So at night the air is quite humid, and then these earthen materials absorb materials and desorb at the daytime. So that's how they condition spaces, in this case especially the temperature. And in our cases, I will present soon, we can condition spaces in relation to humidity. And the humidity is a big topic because we are running our buildings with more and more technical systems. So in Europe, we have the problem that we are drying down our houses in the wintertime. And that's a quite relevant research what was done in the 80s, so that the humankind should live in a humidity level between 40 and 60 degrees. And also bacteria, fungus, and other things start growing if the air is too dry. So that's why we need to bring our buildings into something what is a very good climate condition between 40 and 60 degrees. And we measured through our buildings and also historic buildings that earth and timber can condition spaces around 40, between these areas, between 40 and 60% of relative humidity level. And so we designed, based on the research of H-House and others, a building system without ventilation systems, which is very stable in the humidity throughout the year and giving a very good, healthy comfort. And that's based on a traditional knowledge, like earth, timber, wood fiber, all these materials have the same behavior. So we are adapting these traditional materials, transform them in a new building system, and have a modern contemporary building. And that's what I like to show on that old barn. So that barn is nowadays owned by Emanuel Heringer, the cousin of Anna. And he has been working with us in Rudrapur. And when we have been on site, he told us that this barn should be taken down and he would like to clear off. So they have rebuilt it, stored it somewhere, and brought it to another place, because this construction is completely reversible. And he had the idea to bring his own workshop and house into it. And that's a perfect sample of how circular building could be used. So in 1810, the beams have been cut, so the structure has been built 200 years ago. And on the signatures of the carpenters, we could see that this building had already 3 lives and has been standing on 3 locations. And now it should be burned. And so he took it over this fossil and consume period. And I think it will last hundreds of years again. So we brought it to another location and have been integrating our healthy earth timber structure building system and like a healthy house, what is quite linked to this traditional way. So that was the original location with a natural stone foundation. We brought in a new foundation. On the new location, we reassessed this historical structure. So it's taking loads at everything. And we installed a new building shell out of earth, wood fiber, and timber. Like timber as a load-bearing, like 30 centimeters of insulation in fibers, and the inside cladding with earth. And we don't need for this is airtight, high energy efficient, very well insulated building, very comfortable. And we don't need a ventilation system because the walls are controlling the humidity level inside very properly. And that's from the construction side, and you can see here how nicely integrated, based on craftswork, the new timber structure is into this old barn in the same manner like the historic building was showing us. And then we integrated earth blocks, earth plasters, wall heating, and in that case we don't need a cooling, a wall heating system to have a good, comfortable heating system as well in that old shell. And that's how it looks now. So that's the flat of Emanuel and Stephanie. And that's all natural surfaces. So we have a white earth plaster. It's a mix of white minerals and white sand. So it's the same performance like the brown materials. And it's an industrial product for sure. And it's through design. And Christoph, my partner, is involved in this kind of development of materials. And we have earth blocks down below and a brown plaster. The flooring is coming from the own forest there and is done with a kind of soap wash. It's all natural, so it can be in cycles and reassembled and reused, or actually at the end of life going back to nature very easily because it has no pollution. And that's the lower levels, something like a 1.5-story building. And actually, we've thought that would be something like an atelier with around 120 square meters. And actually now lives there in a family with 5 people. I think now they have another child, so they are living with 6 people. So they have files against the housing units, because usually they take lawyers to close down the concert halls, and the government took care to protect these concert halls. So there was actually they thought about office building there in between, but we introduced this production there because nowadays clean production can also return to the city. So we have introduced the same kind of technology, high insulated natural building shell, and we're using our waste from production to heat up the building. So it's a kind of plus energy building on the heating level, and we are using photovoltaics, etc., to make it a very green building. And nowadays we are sending, as the building is so much efficient, we are sending hot water for heating to the neighbors because we have so much waste and the building is so efficient. And that's how it looks from inside. An amazing teamwork again with these clients. We couldn't say that's our design because it's an integrative design, and all these sketches have been switching from one to the other table, and it's an integrative design approach. And it's quite nice that we got to this very nice result. And that's how clean production can come back, and people can live in the neighborhood and they can work in the neighborhood. And that's, I think, a little bit our vision of a future city. And scaling up, it's a huge industrial production hall. So we are building 2 of these yards. Actually, the whole plot could be filled up with around 45,000 square meters. And our first step was to build 15,000 square meters. It's research, training, production, logistics, etc. It's a quite complex building with a very simple structural idea. So we have a skeleton structure and a very flexible use space, so you can fit in with every function into that structure. No? And so the idea is to build up the first 3 floors with a concrete structure, so hybrid structure. I think that's also something what we are going through for the next decades, to think about what is possible, so to introduce as much as possible natural materials. This building could have been done completely in timber, but cost-wise, we decided at the end to have these vertical elements and beams in concrete, what is also quite aesthetic, and the ceilings in timber. And the whole cost of the project is around 20 million euro. And the additional cost to switch from concrete to this timber ceiling was around 200,000. So the client decided to have this nice ceiling that people feel well in that structure. So he invested a little bit more, and he could not, because he wouldn't like to have these simple, poor gypsum panels under the roof, because he hates this kind of material. So now we have this beautiful timber ceilings and a nice structure. The whole building shell is in wood for sure. And we did a lot of action together with Professor Hausladen from Munich on climate design. So have tried night cross ventilation with special items, and to make it a low-tech and comfortable building. And actually what is quite interesting, we're using wastewater. We are having here a collector inside of the channel. We are pumping through a heat pump system from that wastewater heat to heat up the building from wastewater from the neighborhood. So that's how it looks. That's the fourth floor. It's completely in timber, and all the other floors are in timber and concrete, as you can see here. That's a boulevard connecting all the yards and is the main backbone of the building. And that's how it looks if the production moves in. So that's a new factory, and I think that's how just thinking, deep thinking and designing and working integrative with the client again, I think that's how you can reach these kind of things. And I like this kind of quality of building, and that I think this is a good step in the future and quite innovative also for Europe. So that's from outside here. You can see these night cross openings. That's rain protection, can be opened the whole night. And similar things we're doing in our schools, for example, in Pakistan, I will show later on. So it's quite similar how that low-tech things work in different climates. So our vision is now to make a complete natural structure for housing in 7 stories, elevator shafts, everything in timber as a low-tech building with a breathing materials. We just have a concrete slab against the earth, and then the whole structure could be in timber. And we were thinking about biodiversity, rainwater, etc., etc. And our vision is to have a regrowing city based on natural resources. So we have a network established, what we call die nachwachsende Stadt, what this could be translated in the regrowing city based on natural resources. So we are trying to link up with different architects. We're doing conferences and trying to do research as well in that network. And our vision would be a mixed city working and living together in food workable, walkable distance. So 5 stories would be something we would accept, or 4 stories for housing, and on a layer of maybe 2 or 1 or 2 stories of production or whatever different uses in the ground floor. So we are moving now out of Europe. That's a renovation project, a rehabilitation project of Jahidi Fort in Abu Dhabi and Al Ain. It's a nice oasis city. So the request was to renovate the structure, and we also got the contract then when in the early beginning of our works. And the award, Aga Khan Award, was a big support to get that contract. And the nice story at the end is that here in this huge backyard, the ceremony last year happened where the 2 Bangladesh projects also got awarded, and I could participate. It was an amazing moment for us as awarded architects doing this kind of rehabilitation works in the Middle East to have the location for the award ceremony 2017. So and that's how it was looking through the construction time. So we had to treat all the timber elements, what is in that case palm trunks. We treated here in the background. So we stored all the earth blocks, so it's an earth block or adobe building. We soaked all the mortars, and then we brought in completely all the materials. And so up to the final layer of plaster and flooring and roofing, we used original materials. And that's also, again, showing how earth could be a circular material for the future. So then for sure we applied some intelligent wall cooling system here, water-based, very efficient and comfortable system. And we brought in a very sensitive, very high quality of craftsmanship through Hunashala Foundation from India, friends of ours. We are working since a couple of years together, since 10 years, 11 years now. And they did all the trainings and craftsmanship of this high quality of renders, but that's the original material we brought on a wax on the floor, so that looks like marble and it's quite resistant. And but we didn't try to change the design, because that's the first rehabilitation in this sense for a earth building in Abu Dhabi. And so we try to be as close to as possible to the original, and we introduced this nice exhibition on Wilfried Cesicher here in this exhibition cabins with a nice gray render. And that's a new item, but I think quite similar to the tradition, and from outside you don't see anything. And that's the work we are working on at the moment. That's in Abu Dhabi's city. Qasr Al Hosn, again a renovation project, so since 11 years we are working in the region here and up to Afghanistan and other countries in rehabilitation of earthen and other natural-based buildings. So coming back to this diagram, half of the world population lives on that end of the scale, what is quite often this kind of simple poor huts, and that in case of a very simple or missing foundation, they start rotting very quick. So life expectation of these huts in Mozambique is about 5 to 10 years. So if you think about 8 years, this gentleman would have a life expectation of 43 years. So he would live in 5 to 6 houses in his life, and he was spending something like 30% of his power in building simple huts, what we shouldn't call a house, you know. And that's it's very simple to make these things durable by a proper foundation. And what we thought, we could add something like 80 euro or 100 US dollar for a foundation and a treatment for the timber. And these buildings could be very durable. And they could afford it in around 2 years with a microcredit to not build on their houses, but go for work and then finance their house could last very, very long. But unfortunately, even if it was the Aga Khan Foundation, we didn't move into a housing program that would be very, very interesting for us to do something against these poor huts. Coming to the school, the very nice thing, we have been both quite young, for sure Anna even younger than me, but through our research before the design, we met Paul Tigger. He had the vision to build on traditional routes in Rudrapur, a school building. So Anna was there as a volunteer and visiting also through university a lot of times, Bangladesh, and we met on a conference, so we went together for research for her final thesis, and we developed then also the structural system. So we found these nice houses, but also the same problems with uprising humidity, durability of houses, so they also don't last very long. Insects and animals, here rats and mouses attaching the walls. So it's again quite poor, even if they can look quite nice, poor conditions. So what we did, we designed a proper foundation to keep the house out of the flood level and bring in a horizontal dam proof. And then we started mixing this earth with the local earth with some rice straw, because that's a very poor earth, so it's not rich on clay minerals. So the mixture with straw is quite efficient, and so they used to work to form the hands without the straw with their own hands. But we brought in a technology with mixing with the straw, what we call Wellerbau or COP in Europe. And we introduced this one, what is quite familiar to them. And it's a very, very simple earthen technique. As you can see here, you just use that material mixture, put it on the foundations, and then you start cutting after drying time with a spade, with a flat spade, this overhang, and then you shape the final building out of this small mountain of earth. And that's very, very simple. And it was so nice how these guys, you know, this technique hasn't been built since more than 100 years. And I started to find out how it could work. We did some small samples in Berlin before, for sure, but then in that scale. And those guys immediately took over and explained me and showed me how that could work. And that was an amazing interaction with these people. So then layer by layer, this is shift up. So we have 5 layers here. Then there's a joint to the bamboo ceiling. So we developed a very simple system of a triple layer bamboo ceiling with a nice knot with a steel pin and a quite proper rope connection. So they used to work with rope and bamboo. We brought in additional this stick that this bamboo cannot, actually that shouldn't happen, that the bamboo cannot roll if it's in the construction. And that was the ceiling system, and we were thinking about roof construction. Actually, the design idea, design idea was to have a Fachwerk, like a space frame system, and what is quite hard to work out in bamboo. So Emmanuel brought up the idea when we have been experimenting in his workshop through the design phase to bring up this beam. And I didn't give a lot on it, but our civil engineers, they really loved it. So we did some tests. And that is actually the building system we are working in a lot of projects abroad when we are working with bamboo. It's quite simple to produce, and you can get a big span. And it's very easy to make it as a handcrafted building. So in parallel to the earthworks, we have been producing 25 of these beams. We then started to fill the ceiling with earth, so there's an earth floor as well on the first floor. And then we installed all that things, and we have been producing facade elements in parallel. And that's, I think, an amazing photo, but that's how it happened. It was really like I didn't have any other connection in that time, very, very rare mobile connection. There was no other projects in work, so we did everything on site. Carpenters, everybody was sitting on the site, and we could discuss every detail, develop every detail of the building on site. And it was quite amazing to work with the craftsmanship in that behave, and to develop a quite a rough detail what fits to the conditions of that materials and construction methods. And that's the inside ground floor classrooms. We have 3 of them, and we have one of the big ones and a small classroom in the upper floor in that bamboo structure. In the ground floor we have these nice caves where these kids can play individual or work individual, as I mentioned before, for this Modern Education Training Institute for the first 4 classes. And so we designed in a way for those kids through their teaching philosophy, but also through the hands of the people. So that's quite interesting to have this kind of approach, just straight ahead from ground, from scratch, from resources, let's say. And that's how it looks, and I think most of you might have seen that before. And that's quite nice if you're working together with your own civil engineers. Here you can see again this testing of this beam. That's actually what Emmanuel produced in his workshop when we've been there before starting the design. And that's a set of tools you need to build up this bamboo structure. So that's what I also tell my students. Get a nice hammer, a nice saw, maybe a little drill, and that's it. And then you can go and build very nice structures and design well, and then you can do it with your own hands. So that's the approach what we do with our design build workshops. So we built another project as a sister school based on the same building system in Pakistan near Lahore. We made a schedule of questions, what we handed over to the client who did the research in the field. So he came back with a lot of information, and we designed then based on his information, and for sure things we could find in literature and in the internet about climate, and we designed, in the same manner, a proper foundation, thick earth walls, and the bamboo ceiling. And but in this case we had a flat roof area because they have a very arid, dry season. So we brought in the ceiling system on another layer, and we have a flat roof for sure with a bitumen belt as a roofing system. And as we have a cold winter and a hot summer, we did massive fill-ups of the bamboo walls in the upper floor, and we integration was to build based on that system a nice villa for a rich person in Lahore, bringing in introducing nice textiles and maybe a nice flooring in timber or whatever. And it could look the same like the house of Emmanuel and Stephanie in Bavaria. No? It's just the raw construction in the background, and that's what I think what makes these things quite familiar, and what we should introduce into a wider society. And that's how it looks from outside. Unfortunately, we have just built half of it, and the second phase did not happen up to now. But hopefully in a few years we will also install 4 more classrooms. And I think that's the final project I would show. It's Iraq. It's a trauma therapy center in Kurdistan, Iraq, the northern Iraq, what is affected through this war crisis with ISIS. What you can still see here in the map of 2016, and that was exactly the time when we started working there. And I think since 2014, at that time, 2016, they already had 1.5 million refugees coming to that small piece of land, and with a lot of people with a lot of traumas. And we got in contact through a nice person. She is supporting our work on some points in different ways. And she brought us together with Jian Foundation. They are working in Kurdistan with around 200 therapists. working in the camps. And the vision of this organization is to have a nice healing garden where they also can install a training for teachers, a clinic for people who have very hard traumata, which should be there for a longer period, and to do all that based on a traditional manner. So using for animal-based therapy, traditional animal kinds, using traditional plants, and also for sure building based on the own building tradition. So the location is here. These are camps which has installed Saddam Hussein in the 1980s. He bombed out all the Kurds in the mountains, in the villages, with phosphor bombs, and brought them together, whoever kept alive, into that kind of military camps. And that's the location where they still live. And they have these huge corridors for military control of these systems. So these are kind of more of informal settlements. And inside of this corridor, we received the Gian Foundation received 45,000 square meters of land to set up this healing garden. So our first scope was in quite an immediate action to build animal-based therapy center, like a little farm, with spaces where kids and ladies could meet with the animals, but is supporting the therapy quite well. And we went to the villages and did a deep investigation how they worked, and transformed it into a new way of building like a farm type of therapy center. So we have the courtyard in the center, we have the buildings around, we have the private gardens connected to the buildings, and then we have a kind of agricultural land close to it, and then the wider zone in between all these clusters is kind of a dry, natural zone based on trees in a kind of park style. So that was our first designs for the animal-based therapy. And the construction site, that's the region where people used to work with earth blocks or adobe. So we are getting back to this technology, and we started building, introduced the proper foundation again and a good roof. But also the roof construction is like in a historic way in timber. And these animal huts are done in small span, so we could do it completely with timber beams. And that's how it looks at the end. We have, I think, like around 200 animals living there, and then all these visitors all around, and we are connecting them with the shaded areas. And it was quite a nice teamwork, pigeons and goats, etc., etc. And after that immediate action in 2016, the students who have been working on moved into a master thesis. So back in TU Berlin, they started a master thesis doing the whole master plan for the whole thing. So they were designing like a draft design of a clinic, of the visitor center, and also a craft center. And that's the next step. So they brought in all that functions, and it's more like a flexible master plan, and any budget of what is there. And this is a program what will be built about 10 or 15 years, and then there will be a lot of change. So it's more like a flexible master plan to go stepwise. So this was finished in 16, and the animal-based therapy. And now we are building a second phase, what is a craft center, where we have a bakery and pottery and all these things where the ladies can work on. And that's the second phase we are working on. And there's also a wastewater plant. So that was also built in parallel by Gian Foundation and Border, an organization on wastewater treatment system. There's the big channel of the neighborhood for wastewater. We are taking this water, treating it and using it to install this park. And that's quite recent photos, so everywhere green is coming up. So we need to take care now that also the park will be a nice park. So other colleagues from TU Berlin now starting another project with a full year from October to take care about the gardens, because we had a kind of landscape design, but the buildings got introduced quite well, and they could adapt very good. But to make a garden, it's very uncommon for them, because it's usually a garden for vegetable or a farm, but to have a park is very uncommon. And so there's some attention needed for the future, but I'm thinking we're on a very good path. And 28th and 29th of October, we are going there to have an inauguration of the first phase, but also a later inauguration, because the airports have been closed down. And what is more relevant, we are doing a conference on therapy, trauma therapy and architecture in parallel on one day in cross sessions. What might be very, very interesting to see how we can link up these two topics. And that's recent photos I just downloaded from the construction site of the second phase. Here you can see it's sanitary rooms which have some bricks integrated, but everything else is sun-dried earth blocks, a concrete ring beam to shape these things together, and then again timber as a roofing structure or roof structure. And as we need bigger spaces here, we have these concrete beams to get bigger spaces based on this traditional thing. And that's our vision then for the future, to build 2 stories for the clinic. And yeah, it would be also a vision to build a 3-story house in the neighborhood or something like that. But we will see what's coming up in the future. Up to now, we have a very, very good link. We have a perfect team. So we had the foundation, we had our office, we had our students who did the design and master thesis together with the TU Berlin. We got some funding, etc. It's a huge network of people, and so we call it, it's a practice integrated, like in the office integrated, international design build collaboration for the university and students. And I think that's quite fruitful to use that resources and also give the opportunity to work in this kind of context. And that's really when I feel at home or feel very good, if I can open up these potentials for our young fellows in the office and in the university. So the next phases are coming up, and hopefully we can show soon also more about it. And again, with Dipshika, we learned very much how important it is to have a strong, good related, linked NGO on ground. It was a dream working with them and with the people, and we had quite similar things here. And this is the civil engineer who took over site supervision, and he really dived into that materials and technologies. And it's the first time that we are not any longer on ground, and this guy took over construction. And in a couple of weeks, they are developing and building now the second phase. So it's very nice to see how quick now, after doing a pilot project, a second phase can be done. And he is keen to know, to build 2 stories with it, and he's really taking this technology further. And this is the founder of the foundation, who is really passionate with this healing garden, and I think that's what we need, a perfect team. If we could have introduced some more women to the building project, would have been very nice, but that was not possible at that point in that village. So that's again Bangladesh. Yeah, we learned quite a lot in that collaboration. MP Ranjan, a professor in National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad, mentioned that what they call a half carries a quarter. I think, I don't know if we really have a D norm in Germany for these kind of logistics. And I think that's exactly what we can learn, to forget a little bit about our mindset and, cross borders and see where it can take us together. And Kiran Fagela, he's one of the heads of Funashala Foundation in Kutch in India, a good deep friend with us, and we spent 2 weeks of silence with him now in Jaipur the last 2 weeks. And we had a discussion on, or we had a project, big project starting in Addis Ababa, where we had to involve more than 100 workers or laborers or crafts. And we thought all these guys have been linked with the money because they went to the city, and he gave us a lot of nice help how we could approach these people, what was running really well out at the end. So they have a good, a very, very good experience on the community level. And we had a 2-hour session on Skype, like in 2011. It was a nightmare understanding him, and then he closed so nicely. And that's what I usually have since then as my closing. We can approach together, and that's what we learned. And I think against people who are telling us that there is no climate change or we should close borders and all that bullshit what is happening in our globe at the moment, we had this nice workshop in March in Egypt with students from Cairo, also going out to the villages, and we designed and built in 10 days or in a week time a small shelter in that village. And it was nice to see how much power and energy and, you know, interest they have to take over and to change. And I feel the same here. So I'm sure change is in the air and is doable. And yeah, we have to stand together. That's a nice project we did in Berlin and in Milano before. It's a reversible construction as well. So I think we have to stand together and care with each other. So I'm sure we can. Thank you very much. So I would accept 2 or 3 questions if you like.
We need like 2 minutes to set things up.
Thank you so much, Professor Klinge. We're now going for a few questions from the audience, if anybody has any. Mundakim? Here.
Hello. So we consider mud as sustainable material because mud is a material that goes from cradle to cradle. So I have 2 questions. Number 1 question is what is the life expectancy of mud building in our context? Like we have a warm, humid climate with driving rains. So what is the life expectancy in our country? And my second question is, we mix straw and other things like cement to make it strong, and then we use borax to make it, to get rid of termite attack. So is it completely cradle to cradle thing? Like when mud wall is demolished, what happens to the other substance we mix with the mud? Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, the durability, especially in the humid climate, is quite a big topic. But if you look at the school, this technology of COP is quite robust. So if you have a good overhang so that the vertical rain is not really touching the building, the driving rain with small drops, it's not an issue for this technology. So if you see the school now after 15 years or 13 years, there is some slightly little erosion, but the straw on the facade is taking off the raindrops. And the earth, for sure, we never use cement. So even if globally most of the constructions are so-called stabilized, but that's not in our sense how we think. It's not any longer an earth construction, so it's a stabilized construction with cement. It adds something like 8 to 10, 12% of cement, and the concrete has 15% of cement. So it's a light concrete using other aggregates, and then it's not reversible, so never use, and you're losing all your climate potential. So we never use stabilized construction. That's most important. And then we don't add any things, and borax has nothing to do with the earth. The borax goes to the bamboo. I will come back to this one. So earth can very easy go, can be very durable if you use COP technology. And on the other hand, you need a dry foot. That is a foundation. You need a good head, that the natural construction is really in a dry condition. And if we are thinking, for example, about 2 or 3 story buildings at the moment in earth, and we could also clad it with a bamboo facade element, and then it would be protected as well in the same manner. So I think we can react on that, even if we are scaling. But there's development work and design work to be done for that. And the borax we used for the bamboo to treat it, and that's for sure an issue. We didn't do so because we thought, yeah, people locally know how to do, and then we promoted to put it into the pond in Rudrapur. So they did so, but they didn't get out these things, and so the building got attacked, and after 7 years we had to take it down completely. It's just the bamboo structure, so the earth wall it contains, and had to rebuild it. So we brought in borax technology with Hunashala from India, and that for sure is a problem because you have to take care about these materials in the construction. It shouldn't be a big problem. But at end of life, if you burn it or whatever, it's a lot of borax salt, and that's a risk, and that has to be taken very seriously somewhere in a deposit or whatever. No? So that's a risk, but we are hoping that this construction could last very long and that's acceptable. But also there could be more research on there. We know about people who are doing seawater treatment or also flushing treatment. If you have a river what is really running and then you take out all the knots and the water can flush out all that attractive things. And then also that could be a method, but I wouldn't propose to use it because we don't really how to install it. So us personally. And there are some also other technologies what are not so proved, for me at the moment, not proved enough to build with durable construction. So that's hopefully something what is just for a period of time. Yeah.
Would you like a wireless to like move around or sit
Okay.
down?
Yeah, that's easier.
So okay.
So you have one? You have another one, or?
Okay. Hello, thank you for your lecture. It was very inspiring. I have a small question that the old burn house that you showed, there was a white plastering, which you said it was natural completely. I'm wondering that, what was the composition of that plastering?
That's just white sand and white clay minerals. So that's something like an artificial mix of earth at the end of earth plaster.
And the white sand was from the place, or it was taken?
No, that's an industrial product. So they collect these minerals all over Germany and do their colorful plaster. So they have a variety of colors. And so you get it ready-made from the producer. Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's quite some knowledge, no? So it's not so easy to apply it. What we usually do, we do a lime wash, and then you can add also other minerals to get it not so whitish white, so you can also work with that one. No? Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. I have been wondering about one thing, that the sustainability issue is more important in, I feel, in urban areas. And when we think about vertical extensions, I don't know, but I have visited Meti school, and the ground floor was built in mud, and the first floor was built in bamboo. And so the structure was quite enough strong. But when we go more about more stories, like first 10th floor or 11th floor, 12th floor, then what would be the material that we can use as more sustainable elements? And it is important, I think, because in urban contexts, there is more pollution and there's more problem. So.
Yep. I think there that comes into the direction of hybrid construction. If you would say we were in Germany, we are building up to 10 stories now in timber. And also what I would propose, or things we are thinking about working on at the moment, is to work in hybrid construction. So if you have a higher building, you can still go into a concrete frame and take as much concrete out as possible and then bring in natural materials. Then you can reduce the footprint quite a lot. But usually what I think real sustainable construction is a walkable construction. So it is up to 5 floors. Or even 4 floors. And I think if you think about how many people live up higher than 2 floors, or let's say 5 floors, it will be 2% of world population or something. And also it will be never ever as green. They try to make it efficient and really a sustainable construction if you're getting into high rise. No? That's just showcasing of economic power, and that's just a very simple thing money is establishing, installing inside of the cities. We shouldn't think about too much about these buildings. Don't care about them. Care about other aspects, care about the people, care about density in suburban areas, care about density in informal settlements, better life, and creating open spaces through densification and things like that. There's a lot of work, and I think that's more sustainable. And even in the villages, they're starting more and more to build in brick, and brick is a nightmare for Bangladesh, for example. I heard the government will try to close down the brick factories and switch into concrete. I don't know. There's a lady. She was working on life cycle assessment. I don't know if you compare cement blocks and brick. I think the footprint will be at the end quite similar, but you just push the pollutions to India where you get your cement from. So that's not really the choice. Maybe it's one thing for the moment, but I think we need a bigger step.
And another thing that we are mostly using burnt bricks that is causing pollution. And I am a little interested about compressed earth bricks that is not burned. And what can be the difference between that two materials? Are they similar, or the burnt one is more durable?
Yeah, I think that the earth blocks have a huge potential. So especially if you think about the wall thickness of Meti School, it's around 60 centimeters. It's quite thick. And for a big span building, it's quite okay. But if you have seen the housing projects from Anna in the village, and then the wall is getting in relation to the space you generate quite thick. And then you also need to afford a big foundation and a huge of material. And our vision would be more to go into earth blocks and work with 2 to 3 stories with 40 centimeters or 2 stories with 25 centimeters. And then we usually promote sun-dried blocks, which are very easy to produce, and they are also very robust. And the compressed blocks, they are not that robust, and mainly they are stabilized. So most of the technologies, they add the cement, and so we would not do that.
Just to add a little in this discussion from last few questions, that few of the ideas of building with mud and sun-dried brick is like a traditional thing in Bangladesh in many areas as well. you may also like look into those examples. Like there are three-storied mud building in northwestern Bangladesh for several years, and they are like lasting for more than 20-25 years. I have like seen and been to those buildings myself, and it's very natural here. So if you question that whether it is feasible for our context, of course it is. It is there ever since. Okay, any other question maybe or comment? Then I think we can call it an evening. Thanks so much, Professor Eike Roswag-Klinge, and everybody who came here today on a bad weather evening. Thank you so much. We are going to meet you again, hopefully, on the first week of October, where Professor Hassan Radwain will give a public lecture. You'll see the announcement on our social media and other channels. Keep an eye. Okay, thank you. Good evening.